Welcome back to That's So Second Millennium and our new series on papal names, where we will explore the history of popes and the names they have chosen for themselves, or not, because that wasn't always the custom, in the framework of the Pope Name Bracket, a fanciful ranking of 64 possible names a pope could take in the 21st century. Paul and Bill are back and will cover current events, ancient history, philosophy, theology, and many points between. Welcome back, and we're glad you're joining us. Welcome back, friends, to our 148th episode of That's So Second Millennium. Because there's been an over 2-year hiatus since the last episode, and we're starting a new series with a specific focus. This will go into the archive as episode P1. In this episode, Bill and I get back into the saddle and open up our discussion of the history of papal names, including Leo, of course, but also spending a bit of time on the remarkable history of the name Pius since the French Revolution, since it provides a great example of how a papal name can go on a tear and then fall to the wayside again for a while. I hope this is a pleasant surprise for those of you who still got TSSM on your subscription list. And for anyone who's new, feel free to pick and choose a few of our archive episodes, where we've interviewed scientists, philosophers, theologians, and interesting people of many descriptions. Now here's episode P1 of the Pope Names Bracket. The whole idea was to, after Francis passed away, an idea, and it wasn't the first time I'd had this idea. I don't know how far back it goes, but the idea of examining the lists of papal names up to now,
Right.
and sort of handicapping, if you were, the likelihood of different names, and just considering the pros and cons of different names at different points in history. And I
Right.
really did think that, probably the first, in NCAA bracket terms, the top one seed was probably Leo. I mean, it was just time.
Yeah, huh?
Leo the 13th, great pope, great legacy, and it's a great name. I mean, Leo the Lion, first of all.
Right.
How could you do better than that?
Right.
Leo the First, Saint Leo the Great.
That's right.
Hard to go wrong with that. And clearly a name that's got enough of a history that there had already been 13 of them.
Right.
And as you always, you go into numerology. I remember years ago hearing something that, the Italian wags in the 60s, predicted woe for Paul VI because he chose Paul VI, and 6 is an unlucky number.
I did
It's
not
not
know
quite
that.
7. I heard that somewhere. It's worth the sheet of paper it's printed on, which hopefully is absorbent and you can put it in the outhouse. But such is life, right?
Right.
So, but I mean, unlucky numbers, 13. So Leo the 13th has already taken the hit for you, kids.
There you go. Right.
Already through. So, Leo the 14th. 14 is a wonderful number. It's 2 7s. It's 2 7s. It's got
Yes.
double the 7. Right?
Yeah.
7's a great number. So if you, even from just a numerology perspective, I mean, why not? Leo the 14th, let's roll.
I love it. Yeah.
So, but I mean, Leo the 13th was embedded in a long series of Piuses, which is an interesting name in itself. I mean, we could go anywhere. But let's on an impulse, let's frame it this wide. Let's just keep it to 2 centuries for the moment. And we'll obviously widen the scope because we're going to talk about all 2,000 years of popes.
Right.
But, if you widen the scope out to just the 19th and 20th century, okay. So I'm going to cheat and do the long 19th century, which I think I hear as a term in literature, although I heard that 20 some years ago and I may be remembering it wrong. But, if you go all the way back to the beginnings of, what's her name? Who wrote not Wuthering Heights as the Bronte girl? Jane Austen.
Jane Austen.
Jane Austen.
Right.
Yeah, I think she started in the 1790s or something. So you can have a long 19th century. I don't know. Or maybe it was a long 18th century and extends into the 1820s. I forget. Anyway, okay. So we'll go a little bit beyond the 19th century. We'll go all the way back to Pius VI.
Okay.
So Pius VI, only the 6th, right? Okay, Pius. Pius itself is a great name. it means it's Latin for, well, pious, right?
Yeah.
So that's where we get the English word.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Pius the First was a long time ago, was an early first millennium pope. And then there had been a few, obviously, there had only been four in between times. And
Right.
Pius the Fifth was in the late 16th century, so in the in the Catholic Reformation era, as it were.
Ah.
I think Pius
Right.
the Fifth and Paul the Fifth were really kind of the ones to bring the Council of Trent, reforms together. And
Ah, okay.
I forget actually which one was the one who promulgated the mass that followed the Council of Trent, which is the traditional Latin mass as we now have it, right?
Right.
Basically, plus the small changes that John the 23rd made in 1962. Okay, so Pius the Sixth brings this name back out of you know if you go what the 1500s to the 1700s, so it had been 200 years. So it had been in papal in papal terms, it's not that long.
That's right.
It's not that long, but it had been a little while. It had been a minute since there had been a Pius. He's like, okay, I'm going to trot this name out of retirement and bring this forward. And then what happens? The French Revolution happens. Napoleon
Right.
happens, and Pius the Sixth goes from what popes of the 18th century had been, which is petty Italian princes, with this funny liturgical role tacked onto them.
Yeah.
Um, he goes from that to being a political white martyr, right?
Right.
He gets he gets frog marched out of the Vatican and hauled around, dies in exile, and all of a sudden Pius is now a name that's like this has now got some cachet.
Right.
And again, I guess six was an unlucky number.
Yeah, it sounds like they
Oops.
are for sure.
So after an interregnum, and because this situation is awful, and in fact, I mean, I remember reading something that people speculate. So there's a book that's probably informed me perhaps too much
Yeah.
that I read back in undergrad. That was a
Okay.
legacy left over from the old days at my Newman Center. It was not the sort of thing that the priest in charge of my Newman Center when I was there would have had them buy. But it was an old book, probably written. Actually, I think it was probably written in the 30s when Pius the 11th was Pope. Um, it's called Their Name is Pius,
Huh.
and it's a biography. It had biographies of Pius the Sixth, Pius the Seventh. Let's not worry about Pius the Eighth; he's not very important. Pius the Ninth, who's Pope for 30 odd years, and then Pius
Oh.
the Tenth. He was, of late, glorious memory at the time she was writing.
Oh, okay.
So those four popes, those are you know, four nice popes to write about. Um, so okay, so she writes about so Pius the Sixth, and that so Pius the Sixth dies in exile. He's been hauled around to God knows where, and here we go. Upgrade today. Yes, yes. What do we got left? We got 10 minutes left. Okay.
Okay.
Um, so Pius the Sixth is dies in exile, and people are like, well, I mean, Napoleon owns Italy, owns Rome. Um, what are the cardinals going to do? I mean,
Right.
is this the end of the papacy? I mean, because they don't have any political power. And of course, there were people who were just panting for that, who just wanted that outcome so much. The Voltaires of the world, although Voltaire was dead by that point. But those they wanted that. So the cardinals get together somewhere in exile, elect somebody, and he's like Pius the Seventh, you know, throw down. Um, And of course, he outlives Napoleon by a considerable margin because he's pope for 20 years, I think, 20 some years. So then of course, he goes through the rest of the Napoleonic era, which is a long, trying period for lots of people, definitely including the Pope.
Yes.
Sees it through to the end. I think he's pope for 20 some years. So he at least outlasts Napoleon. He at least goes past 1815. Um, so yeah, Pius the Seventh is a man for the era, an inspiring figure. Um, makes certain reforms obviously because we're going to need to at this point. But he gets the Papal States back for better or for worse. The Congress of Vienna, restores that aspect of the status quo ante. And then we have a few more popes, including a Pius VIII, who, as I say, isn't necessarily all that memorable.
Right.
And then we get Pius the Ninth. And Pius the Ninth. is in that saddle for a long time and goes all the way from, was he elected in the 1840s or 1850s? 1850s. So he sees probably the Second French Republic. He sees Napoleon III, and all the other stuff going on in European politics. And of course, he's the one who's finally, for real, kicked out of the Papal States.
Oh, okay.
And calls Vatican I, which, if you want to take a shallow political, view of it, is him trying to make hay on the theological front since he's lost all of his political power.
Right.
And Vatican I does kind of, in a sense, imperialize the papacy in a way it hadn't, it's the end of a development process through the whole second millennium. Is
Huh.
one way. This is the way I instinctively look at it, not being an expert in this field. Going all the way back to the 11th century and Hildebrand, who became Gregory the Seventh. That in a sense, that process reaches its probable. Hopefully, I kind of hope so. I think it was overdone a little bit. And we're still living in that era, right? I mean, Vatican II didn't change the whole bunch of this. We're still living in the Rome is the final court of appeal for everything, and the Pope can say whatever, the Pope is the source of positive, canon law in the church, and so on and so forth. Again, maybe I'm overstating things. Feel free to criticize me, you or anybody who might listen to this. But that's kind of where we're at. So Pius IX is a very, very, very influential figure. And then, of course, Pius X is a saint, and, takes, despite being extremely conservative in a lot of ways, especially about church music, which we were just talking about, actually.
Yeah.
But he is a massive innovator in the realm of how often should you go to communion?
Oh.
Which prior to that era was if you if you read Amon Duffy's, the stripping the altars, and get a taste of what Catholicism was like in the year 1500. You go once a year. You go at Easter.
Yeah, that's right.
You have to go to confession at some point during Lent, and you take communion at Easter. There you go. And Pius X looks at the modern world and says, we need to be in communion with our Lord and Savior more often than this, I guess. One way to look at it.
Right.
Okay. So, so there's quite a role going. Okay, there's Pius X. Then there's Pius XI. And it's kind of a head scratcher to me, of all the popes from the last 200 years who've been beatified and canonized, there doesn't seem to be any motion on Pius XI, but Pius XI was kind of a stand-up mensch. Smuggled his encyclical into Germany under the Nazis. He were allied with Mussolini. It's not like there couldn't have been negative consequences. Had to have been some negative consequences from that. And of course, he dies early in World War II, if not before, I forget. And Pius XII, why not? At this point, it's the name, right?
Well, so, in other words, Pius XII immediately succeeded Pius XI. Huh?
Yeah. Oh. Pius X, and there's Benedict XV during the First World War.
Okay.
And then Pius XI and Pius XII, right? So, at that point, the record back to the 1770s, I think. I want to say Pius VI was elected in 1775 or something like that. He was Pope for a while. So Pius VI, Pius VII. There's a Gregory or something in there, as well as Pius VIII, and maybe another one that I'm forgetting. I think the popes between Pius VII and Pius IX were not, super long reigns. 8 or 10 years, maybe at most, I think. Then there's Pius IX. So we've got, so at this point, from Pius VI to Pius IX, we have maybe 2 popes who weren't named Pius.
Gee whiz.
Then we work in Leo XIII. Okay, that's 3. And then we have Pius X. And then we have Benedict XV. Okay, that's 4. And then we have Pius XI and Pius XII. So when Pius XII passes away in the late 50s, out of the past, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, there have been 7 popes named Pius and 4 not.
Interesting.
And the 4 not, aside from Leo XIII, are not very memorable.
Right.
I mean, Benedict XV was a nice guy. He wrote a nice encyclical about, I think, Saint Jerome and Scripture. Um, you can get on the Vatican website and read it. But not in the same caliber as Pius IX or Pius X, or even Pius VII. So, there you go. And then, of course, Pius XII has already started the process of reform, of the liturgy with his reforms to the changes to the Holy Week liturgy. So he's already started that. Okay, all of that to
Yeah.
say, I mean, that's just a sort of, here's a typicality of Pope names,
Right.
the history of them over decades and decades, over a span of centuries. Pius became a heck of a name and had a heck of a run.
Right.
I'm not sure there's another run quite like that. If you sit and look at the stats, gosh, 7 popes named Pius, only 4 not. And certainly for ones that had popes with as reigns as long as a lot of those popes. Um, yeah, so that's I suspect unprecedented. I don't think we'll look back and see anything quite like that in the rest of church history. But there have been runs where there have been a lot of popes of the same name. I mean, we got to 23 Johns somehow.
Right. Right. Yeah.
There was some period where there were a lot of Johns. A lot
Yes.
of Johns, a lot of them probably only reigned for 2 or 3 years or something like that.
Right. Right.
Because that's
Yeah.
what happened in the Middle Ages. But yeah, so that's just a sort of fascinating thing. But of course now, because Pius XII passes away, and then this guy comes out of left field and decides to resuscitate the name John, which hadn't been used for like 700 years.
Wow.
And the last one, like maybe wasn't an anti-pope, one of the sort of things that can put a damper on a pope name for
Yes.
quite some time. So he breaks out John for some reason, and then decides to call another ecumenical council, and it wasn't really clear that anybody wanted one. And at least lays the groundwork for actually implements a liturgical reform, the Missal of 1962, and calls this council that's clearly calling for more liturgical reform. Um, Now all of a sudden, what does Pius mean now? If Cardinal Prevost had taken the name Pius the 13th, well, first of all, he had to suck up that numerological 13. So there's that
Right.
barrier. Second of all, he would unquestionably be seen as a pope who's like, he's going to reject the Second Vatican Council, isn't he? He's one of these guys.
Ah.
So the
Right.
name would absolutely carry that at this point. Who knows how long it'll be before the name Pius outlives that? Or maybe there will
Right.
be a pope who actually kind of tries to take that line to at least some extent.
Right.
Hard to say.
Right.
Yeah. That was the whole point of this, new episode of That's So Second Millennium, if that's what we choose to do with it,
Right.
is to start exploring, some of the legacy of pope names, having just had a papal interregnum and a new election. It's maybe not as topical as it would have been in the end of April, but
Right.
it's still very early days of a new pope who's taken a very intriguing name. Who, as I say, not to scratch my own back too much, but I thought Leo was a good name. I thought really somebody ought to take that name.
Yes. Yes.
And if I were giving odds, or if I was putting together a papal name bracket, which was really the inspiration for this, because again, it happened in the spring, so shortly, it had been 2 or 3 weeks after the NCAA's were over with. Um, I guess it was top of mind even for me. I think the first 1 seed, really, really the strongest name in the whole bracket would probably be Leo at this point.
Very
So
impressive. That's good. A good mind reading because there's a lot of different factors that can go into it.
yeah, I
And
mean it's just luck. Obviously, it's just luck. Any more than anybody handicapping any, putting odds on horses, or assembling basketball teams into a bracket. It's like, as it turns out, maybe Kansas is a 3 seed because they dropped a few games down the stretch, but actually they got the horses and they're going to ride. They're going to ride roughshod over everybody now that they're angry. That
no,
sort of thing
that's right.
happens.
Yeah. And uh, I like the way that it comes through that the timeline is influential. The timeline of different popes with the same name is influential in both directions. Like now with John Paul II, and he's John Paul the Great,
Right.
right? I wouldn't want to. I would not expect to see a Pope John Paul the Third anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean that's one of those things that like it depends on the personality because I look at it and I say maybe, you
Yeah.
know, I wouldn't be shocked by that. Um, yeah, it's just I mean that's just so weird. And me having been born in 1979, so it's like John Paul II is, you know, will forever be the guy like, you know, if I open up my unabridged dictionary and there's a little, you know, cameo illustration of what Pope means, there's obviously, you know, there's a little line drawing of John Paul II.
Right.
Period. End of story. That's the Pope, and then everybody since then has just been a stand-in. But because that's just the mental space I will always inhabit. That's how I was formed. That was the experience that formed me.
Now, 1968 was the year of three popes, right? Uh,
78.
I'm sorry, right, 1978.
78. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Paul the Sixth died. John
yeah,
Paul the First, who I've
yeah.
heard multiple times this year about John Paul the First for some reason naming himself the First because he was sure there was going to be a second,
Isn't that
even
odd?
though
Yeah,
even though no pope had ever taken two names before, which
right.
is probably true.
That would be an interesting question. Are there other two names? Yeah. Um, but and John Paul II, I think it's actually part of the historical fact that that he, because of the short reign of the first,
Mhm.
that was a large part for him to choose being John Paul II, right? It was
Yeah. Yeah.
a sense of continuity, or uh, because yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, and
what
I
else
didn't
would
live
prompt
that
that?
that era. I don't know, you know, you having been an adult at that point,
Yes, yeah, I
you
was.
know, what was the reputation of this, you know? And of course, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have, you know, wall to wall media the way that we do now. But you know, I mean, this guy had at least written a few books. He was at least a somewhat famous character within the church. You know, how prominent was he, and how likely did people think that was going? Oh, this guy is going to be a big, you know, personality in the history of the church.
Right. It was. I'm principally remembering the. I being a journalist at the time, I was interested. I loved newspaper parodies, and believe it or not, it was a thing back then.
Hmm.
Where like the National Lampoon would bring
Right.
out a newspaper parody, and there was a Not the New York Times parody with the lead story saying John Paul the First dies, new Pope names himself John Paul the First.
Wow.
So no, I assure you that was the limit of the funniness of the content, but
Yeah.
it was an interesting experience of names and what they could mean, what they were meaning at the time, and you know, just like Pope Leo is feeling some rightful, not pressure, but some compunction to be in continuity with Pope Francis on things like
Yeah.
synodality and everything.
Yeah.
Um, Pope Leo would be interested in a continuity with the synodality, and Pope John Paul II would have been interested in continuity with John Paul the First. But at other times, continuity means nothing, and there can be 100 years between Leos. It
Yeah.
just seems, as you say, it's kind of a mystery. It's God's active in it in every individual's own way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, and that's one of the reasons why I thought Leo was really near the top of the list is because despite the fact that he died in 1903 or something, his
right.
legacy was very much alive because Novarum Rerum Novarum, you know, Pius the 11th of, late lamented memory, and, probably actually my personal favorite, partly because I like underdogs. But
Sure.
of that whole run of Piuses,
Right.
um, wrote, I think his was called Quadragesimus Annus because it was 40 years later.
Ah, right.
Um, and then, of course, John Paul II writes Centesimus Annus because it
Yeah.
was 100 years later. Because that, I mean, and of course, Leo is now, breaking it out. And who knows? I mean, what's he got in the works? At what stage of development is this encyclical at? I don't know. But it is at the very least like there's a drawing board in the Vatican dedicated to it.
Yes.
Like there's going to be a follow up.
Yes.
And whether he, sticks, whether he, holds out for some specific anniversary of it, or whether he's just like, nope, it's just got to go. We've just got to address this. We've just got to get out. We've got to get, on board. Well, not on board with this, but we've got to get, we've got to address this because this is the need of the moment. Um, the changes in the economy that are happening with technology,
Right.
AI,
Exactly.
and everything else.
Yeah, no, and I'm very excited about that having been kind of pre-signaled as a priority. It's so necessary, so timely.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so that's the biggest thing that sticks with me about choosing the name Leo, harking back to that very important Leo the 13th encyclical.
yeah.
Uh, um,
But of course, there are other things you can hark back to Leo the 13th with, including, to take I mean, perhaps the other most famous example, probably the Saint Michael prayer,
oh, indeed,
and
yes,
and and the vision he allegedly had of, the devil, talking about taking over the church or
yeah,
destroying the church, I suppose I should say. Um, yeah, so that sort of precursor to Fatima and things like that. So
yeah,
he's, on the one hand, Rerum Novarum, very much trying to deal with here's the concrete material world of economics and politics as it is, but this world is, under spiritual forces. It was
yes,
created by God, it was saved by God, but as St. Paul says, it's under the dominion of Satan. I mean, Paul doesn't mince words about that. And,
right,
and even the disciples, and Jesus does not, contradict them about this.
right,
Saying this world is under Satan, so show your just authority now. And Jesus is like, it's not the right time. He
right,
doesn't say, he doesn't contradict, oh no, I'm in charge, everything's fine. He's like, it's not the right time.
yes,
And it's not for you to know the Father's timing. But
yeah.
he does not contradict the statement that this iniquitous, generation and world is under Satan. Which
No,
of
that's
the
for
which
sure.
of the
Yeah,
synoptics is that?
yes,
I
yeah.
forget. But whether it's Matthew or Mark, I think it's one of the two. It might be Luke. So, yeah, yeah. So Leo the 13th is like, squarely in both of those, seemingly contradictory worlds.
And as you said, Leo as the lion is a very important metaphor, given what we're saying. These are times when you need a very strong pope, a strong champion against evil forces, and very complicated and rapidly moving forces. And
Yeah,
so it all does make sense. The name does make sense. And uh, let's hope for the best. I think everybody was surprised by Pope Francis being,
yeah.
yeah, that was not exactly a Jesuit saint, you know? Well, although Francis Xavier, people thought at first that he was naming himself after Francis Xavier, right?
Yeah, and that seems not to have been his. I mean, if anything, I mean, that will be part of the legacy of Francis is I mean, for someone who wanted to, reach concord with people at the margins, there's a lot of people who say that his legacy is one of, schism within the church, that he created a
Yeah,
lot of division, a lot of controversy that he didn't
yes,
necessarily need to.
yeah,
But yeah, Francis Xavier going and, baptizing as many pagans as he could, and, teaching, his rudimentary catechism as quickly as he could to as many people as he could, sounds like what Pope Francis condemned as proselytizing.
Right.
So
Yeah. Uh,
that doesn't sound like dialogue. That doesn't sound like, respecting the traditions of other people. Like, and maybe it wasn't, but yeah,
well, we're just seeing constant proof that people are very complicated, and the papacy is very complicated, and the world is very complicated. It's kind of nice that the names are one kind of hook we can, kind of attach to the timeline of history, because everybody has a yearning for some sense of continuity and some sense of meaning. That was one thing that struck me, the importance of names and how nowadays, with so many parents giving their names, giving their kids kind of either made up names or
right,
faddish names,
yeah,
or well, just from a book. The one reason why people felt more sure of their identity and their connection to family over time and to roots, ethnic roots perhaps, or other historical background, was that names were given to children for the sake of having an internal meaning that could be imparted into the person's life and identity in some way.
yeah, yeah, and to connect them to the rest of their family.
Yeah, and so it is a fascinating topic, the names. Uh, most people, most pundits, certainly spend much more time doing a bracket on, who's going, what cardinal is going to become the next pope. So I
Right.
like the fact that your bracket is a little bit different. What name is going to be chosen.
Yeah. Yeah. I
That's
mean,
a
and
that's a different perspective.
it's also, as and what you're saying brings this to mind for me, but it's a very, shall we say, Semitic, as I've often heard, preoccupation with name.
Yes,
So like the book of Revelation talks about, I will give the one who triumphs, a white stone and a new name. Maybe I'm conflating two verses there, but that knowing the name, and of course it's not just Semitic, and in a darker sense, this is also the basis of a lot of occult rituals, magic, and so forth.
right.
Trying to use names, whether of God or of spirits or something, to compel them to act. But that's just a manifestation of the belief that names have power, names have potency, names have meaning.
Yes, yeah. And changing one's name has potency and meaning,
For
especially if
sure.
God changes your name.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And Abraham's name being changed, even if it looks just like he added a syllable. Um,
Yeah.
and then sometimes it happens, and it can be awfully subtle when it does happen. Like, Paul's name, he's just like at some point in the Acts of the Apostle, Saul, also known as Paul, and we'll never use the name Saul again, um, goes and does thus and so. Oh,
Right.
huh. Because he has transitioned from living in the Jewish world, of the tribe of Benjamin, of King Saul, you know, to he's now got a Latin name, Paulus, which is suitable for going about the Mediterranean and proclaiming this Jesus, he had not crucified, that he had
He had yeah,
persecuted.
persecuted. Yeah, as
Yeah,
Jesus said himself to Paul, right? You have
yeah,
been
yeah.
persecuting me.
Why are you persecuting me? Yeah,
Yeah,
it's hard for you to kick against the goad.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of those, like, oh gosh, scripture is so fascinatingly elliptical in so many places.
The
So
connections, yep.
if it's so hard for you to kick against the goat, wait a minute, what do you mean? What what had happened to Paul prior to now, right?
Right.
I mean, there's so many passages in scripture, um, where there's like, if you pause and look at it, like, wait a minute,
there's a backstory there that we're not getting at all.
You're right.
So, like, how had Jesus been poking at Paul prior to then?
Yes.
What did it look like? How did Paul fail to respond or refuse to respond or reject it?
Yeah.
And I've come to suspect that, I mean, there's tons of these in the life of, I think of Joseph and Mary as having just like, I mean, super compressed story we get about their relationship in Matthew in particular. Well, Matthew and Luke. I mean, because we get it remarkably strictly from Joseph's side in Matthew, and then we get it from Mary's side in Luke. Um, there's just so many holes in that narrative, holes
Right.
big enough to drive a truck through. That what are we? I mean, and I've come to believe it's like that was deliberate, and we can see our own personal situation in that. You know, the point on this side of the hole, the point on that side of the hole. Those are our anchor points, and then in between, we can see our own lives.
Yes.
And so I have this anchor point of Saul, it's hard for you to kick against the goat. Stop resisting me.
Right.
This is the way to go. What have I done in my own life that hasn't, measured up? Where have I really been rejecting? I mean, I don't even know if it's worth bothering to say I'm at a point in my spiritual life where I'm, asking that question, like, when should I not be asking that question in my spiritual life? Right.
Right. Oh, it's a continuing journey. Absolutely. Yeah. But so the looking ahead to this podcast journey, how does will we be focusing more on the Leos along the timeline and examine those meanings more, or
Since
will
I
we?
didn't prepare for it and it wound up being a podcast about Piuses instead, I suppose we probably ought to do that. I was doing actually some spiritual journaling that's of pretty top shelf importance. That turns out to be what I was doing this weekend.
Yeah,
And I finished it, about 5 minutes before we were scheduled to start,
really?
which is why I was late. So
Wow.
yeah, so I would like to circle back and like take a little bit deeper dive at Leo, but we have looked at Leo to some extent, so it might be yes, I have a bracket, yes, I've filled out 64 names,
I love it.
so we could walk through that, and of course it will be a lot more than one name an episode, but yeah, just see where this goes and see how long it takes. And
Yes,
have some fun along the way because sometimes this can unearth some really humorous issues as well.
right.
Like Pope Lando. Um,
Pope Lando?
yeah, yeah, like
I
where that
don't.
name came from, what it
Was there
even
a Pope
means.
Lando?
Yep. Oh yeah.
Really?
Oh, and
Okay.
that so I mean you will see as we go through this, there is an enormous difference. We've got like only I think 2 millennia into this Christian experience. There's an enormous difference between the first millennium of Christianity, certainly in regards to popes and their
Uh-huh.
names,
Yeah.
compared to the second millennium.
Huh.
In the first millennium, I mean, so most, probably the vast majority, I don't have any statistics, I haven't tried to count, but an awful lot of popes in the first millennium just use their own name. What else would they do?
Right.
It's not like Peter changed his name. I mean, Jesus had already changed his name for him.
That's right.
But yeah, I mean, that was okay. So maybe that's the precursor to all of this, right?
Yeah,
In the
exactly.
grand scheme of things. But
Names
Peter
are
was the
important.
first one, was the only one to have his name changed for like 500 or so years.
That is interesting, huh?
And popes who've changed their own name, which Peter did not do. Peter had that done for him. Um, Starts with, I believe, John the Second. As I recall, the story is that John the Second, like, looked back, and John the First was not that long ago, and was again, kind of a white martyr, like Pius the Sixth.
Ah,
Died in exile, sort of a pink martyr, if you will. Um, and looked back to him and said, "Stand up, mensch. My name's Mercurio or Mercurius, That kind
Ah,
of sucks
yeah,
as far as the name of a pope.
right.
I guess I was a convert. My parents named me after a pagan god, so
You need a little
y'all,
marketing help.
y'all can just call me John. How
Call
about
me
that?
John.
John the
Yeah.
Second, in fact. How's that? So, um, and then that pattern was not immediately taken up by any stretch. It became the norm in the second millennium. I don't think it became the norm until the second millennium, or very late in the first millennium.
See, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And
So yeah,
I think
there's a huge difference. And so there was some dude named Lando,
that is
and
so
somebody made him
funny.
a deacon, and somebody elected him pope.
Oh my goodness. Pope Lando.
And
Wow.
so, so there was a Pope Lando. And so the question is, did did George Lucas have a dusty, and it would have been
Right.
paper copy of the
Right.
Catholic Encyclopedia from 1909, that he was just leafing through because he was sleepless one night, and said, Pope Lando, I need a character. Lando.
Right.
And he falls asleep on it and doesn't know the following day why he decides to call this guy at this space station, or this planetary base, Lando Calrissian.
Right. Well, that would actually be one of the more solidly based motivations for a Star Wars name.
Yeah.
Chewbacca, that's yeah, that didn't take any historical knowledge or anything
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
No, that was just George Lucas's way of stringing syllables together.
Yes. Yes.
You get
Yeah.
things like Tatooine, and so
Yeah.
yeah,
I actually
yeah.
love that idea of yeah, who are the people who created and fleshed out the Klingon language or
Ooh,
the
yeah,
names and words of Star Wars. I think that's a great eccentric talent that
right.
some people
Yeah,
must have. Yeah.
yeah. Well, and I don't know. I wonder how many people did things like that prior to Tolkien. Of course, Tolkien did
Oh, right. Yeah. Tolkien would have
multiple
been
of them.
yeah, he was a great one.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, the making up your own language. All right, that's an interesting hobby. That's an intensive hobby.
Isn't that something?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. But so, well, our intensive hobby of looking at the church and thinking about the church and people and ideas, both current and historic, is an interesting one, and I would like to pursue this further in additional podcast episodes.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and uh, I'm going to look up Pope Lando more and see
There
what I
isn't.
can learn
He's one of
about
these
him.
popes who's like, first millennium pope. His name is in the records. Maybe he was pope for 6 months, and then he died of the plague or something. It's life as we know it back then. So yeah,
My understanding is that Pope Julius, maybe it wasn't Pope Julius the first, but I remember on a PBS show about the Reformation or the Renaissance rather,
yeah,
they said that Pope Julius had taken his name to, kind of epitomize the secular strength of Julius Caesar. And that's a very
right.
disappointing reason for taking the
That's
name, if
you have
indeed true.
you have
Uh,
chosen poorly. Yeah. Well, but now he was Julius the Second, right?
I think that
So the
was
question
Julius
is,
II, who,
so
right.
the question
The,
is, who is Julius the First, and was he a first millennium pope who just happened to be named, hey, Julius, because he was
that could
descended
very well
from?
be. Right,
I mean, could have been descended from one of Julius Caesar's freedmen. Well, then
right.
maybe Julianus, but yeah, it could just have been a name floating around, or one of the long lost cousins of that family. And it's like, well, there's still one of us around, and he became Christian, became a deacon, became the Pope, which was kind of the pattern back then. So, well,
And there's never been a Pope Peter II.
there's not been a Peter the Second. I put him in the bracket. I think I made him the very last entry.
Is that right? Well, I
I
think
think
in
I, I
that
think I, I think I made Peter the Second the last 16 seed. Yeah,
yeah,
because I mean you
uh,
got to talk about it. It's an option.
it
You
is an
could do
option.
it.
I believe that infamously dubious prophecy of Saint Malachi
Yes.
Um,
There's a St.
said that
Malachi, not Nostradamus, probably. Yeah, it's St. Malachi.
right,
Yeah.
the
The
last
last one on the list is Peter the
was
Second.
Pope Petrus. Yeah,
Yeah. And
Pope
that makes
Petrus
sense. I
II.
mean, like, if you're elected Pope and you look at the world and you're like, clearly, in the saying that I heard somewhere, I think in regard to nuclear weapons, God is jangling his keys and saying, it's closing time.
Yeah.
If that's your opinion of the world as you know it, I mean, like, that would be the time to take that name.
Yes. Yes.
It's time to close the book the way that we started the book.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's chilling and thought-provoking.
Right? Right?
Yes. Yeah. And names can have that kind of impact. They really can. Um, uh, so it's important what somebody is named. It really is.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I
Well,
was
and
I
it's something, since popes now have that, not only possibility but expectation, it's a choice, and I don't know how many cardinals go into a conclave with like, well, if, and with his own personal estimation of how likely or unlikely it is that he gets elected. Well, I guess I would say this. Or if they really would just leave it to the spirit in the moment. Like I don't know if there's a pope who's like, can I wait a few days?
they said
This is a surprise. Give me a minute.
actually that's one of the points of dialogue in the movie Conclave.
Okay.
At one point, a few of the cardinals are chatting,
Mhm.
and one says to the other, "What name have you considered taking if you were elected?" And the other one says, "Well, I haven't thought about it." But the first one says, "Nonsense. Every cardinal thinks about what name
Right.
they would take if they were elected pope." So
It's somewhat
that's
like the
fascinating.
saying that every senator looks in the mirror and sees a president.
Good Lord. Yes. But hopefully, ruminating on a name could help.
Well,
Ruminating might make them more focused on making good choices in the conclave.
since
Yeah.
but it much more than likely won't be me.
Right.
But I hope the person that I do, that does get chosen makes choices like this, or has criteria like this in mind.
Right.
We hope you enjoyed this new episode of That's So Second Millennium. Feel free to subscribe, share, or leave us a comment at thatsosecondmillennium.net. Thanks for listening.